Hey guys, good morning. Welcome back to my channel. I just woke up, I put my contacts in, and I'm back in bed before heading to physical therapy. I am a little tired, and my cramps are really acting up this morning. So I'm about to get ready, put some nice athletic clothes on, and head to physical therapy. So I'll see you guys after that. Okay, so now that that's over and my face is all red, let's drive home. I have one or two errands to run today. I sold one of my old jeans on Curtsy, and if you guys are looking for any no flaws, almost perfect condition clothing, you want to shop secondhand, go look on Curtsy because that's where I put all my things. You can see my handy dandy little placard right here. But yeah, let's drive home. Okay, now on to the part of the video where most of you guys are probably questioning, what is Guillain-Barré syndrome? So I had never heard of this, sickness before until this past May. So to start the very beginning of the story, I was working a full-time job. I was a full-time student, and I was feeling a little off. I was very sensitive to vaccines and my immune system wasn't great. But after the 5th of May, where I had finished a full 12-hour shift, I had started to feel very, very sick. And it was to the point where I can usually push through difficult shifts with no problem at all. I do not give up easily. I can carry like 8 plates in my hand. Even though I'm a pretty short person, I will not give up. That is one thing that a lot of people know about me. But this day, towards the end of the shift, I could not move properly. I couldn't move my arms around. Everything hurt. I felt so sluggish, and I felt just something was wrong. So I went home with my friend, and she stayed with me just in case I wasn't feeling well. And I fell asleep. Well, essentially, the next day, I did have a morning shift. It was a Saturday, and I was serving. So I woke up, and my friend woke up and saw me barely being able to move. And at this point, yes, I was able to walk. I was able to do everything normally, but it was just that I almost had to be dragged everywhere. And I'm not saying like, oh, I didn't want to get out of bed. It was like I actually had to be dragged. So at that point, I called my parents. They obviously didn't want me to go to my job that day just in case. So my mom drove all the way to where I was living with my friends in an apartment, and they took me back home to where I am now. Essentially, the first day I went to the emergency room at a local hospital, and they tested me positive for COVID and released me immediately. They told me that even though my symptoms were a little bit different than the other times I've had COVID, it was probably just a different strain. There's so many different symptoms now, it'll be fine. And to put this into context, I had already gotten COVID 3 times previously. And so it wasn't like I was new to it. I mean, I was obviously scared of COVID, and I knew somewhat of how my body reacted to it, but this was just a completely different level, and obviously all these different symptoms. But they told me I was free to go, so I came back home. And that day, I just spent the day in bed. I had gotten really severe migraines, along with body aches. And some of the most weird symptoms to me were that my neck was really stiff to the point when I was driving, I couldn't check my side mirrors, I couldn't turn around. And because my neck was stiff, I was trying to move my eyes back and forth, and that wasn't working either. So my eyeballs were like sore and in pain. So I had to keep closing my eyes. These pulsing migraines were so bad that I couldn't stand any kind of light, any kind of sound. I was just kind of isolated in my room because of COVID, obviously, and I could barely eat. Everything was kind of starting to go downhill. Well, on Mother's Day, which was Sunday, I woke up and I started to get double vision, and my eyes were not focusing. And so like my right eye was looking that way, my left eye was looking this way, and everything was blurred and double. And I said, this is not COVID. There's something else wrong with me. We called 911. When they arrived, they did all the important checks and measured my blood pressure and everything. And they said, well, it looks like everything's okay. And I don't blame anybody in this situation, okay? I wasn't sure what was wrong with me. My parents weren't sure. My friends had never heard of what's going on because I couldn't contact them. So the people who came and responded to that call said I should be fine, but if I was really worried about it, I should go to a nearby emergency room. Well, as you all know, emergency rooms are notorious for taking a very, very long time. At that point, we were worried that if this got any longer, my symptoms would get worse. And so we were looking around, and eventually my dad ended up driving me to Johns Hopkins downtown Baltimore location, where the emergency room had been a little bit more free, or easygoing, I guess. So I got dropped off there. And because I was COVID positive, I had to be sent in by myself. I couldn't have my parents there. I had my phone on me, but I couldn't, at that point, I felt so weak that I couldn't even carry my phone in my hands. And so I went into the emergency room alone. Of course, pounding migraine. I was asking everyone to shut the lights for me. And I saw a neurologist, eye doctors. I saw a lot of eye doctors. I saw physical therapists. I saw nurses, emergency room doctors, surgeons. I saw every single doctor in that hospital within my about 3-day stay at the emergency room. No one could figure out what was wrong with me. And at this point, it just felt like my body was kind of tingling. It wasn't like in pain. It was more like I had really bad migraines, but I couldn't sit really properly. I was kind of slouching. I couldn't hold myself up. And so in the emergency room, they recommended that I do a lumbar puncture. And for those of you who are not familiar, because I was not familiar previous to this, it's basically a spinal tap. Well, they'll insert a needle into a vertebrae or part of your spine, and they'll gain some kind of fluid, and they'll test it to see if there are, if it tests positive, basically, for any disease or syndrome. Well, apparently, the first part of that is to get it done bedside. And what that means, I don't go into an operating room. I'm just in my emergency room because I can't move much. I'm pretty much stuck where I am. They turn me onto my side and they just poke a needle through my back. There were some anesthetics used. It wasn't like I was being put under. It was just, they would use some anesthetic shots in my back so that it would numb the pain a little bit. It hurt. It hurt so badly, okay? And at this point, I was still feeling everything, and so that was one of the worst experiences. He poked me around a couple of times. My leg shot out during one part of this because apparently he had accidentally touched a nerve, which apparently is pretty common in this situation. And again, I place no blame on anybody. And so eventually, after trying it a couple of times, since bedside procedures tend to be a little bit more risky, they did not succeed. And so I was stuck in a regular, just patient bedroom for about another week. Now, in this bedroom, it wasn't a specialty bedroom. Nobody knew what was wrong with me. I just knew for sure that something was wrong, but they couldn't give me a lot of medication because they didn't want to risk it, and there comes a lot of side effects with medications. And so after I was admitted on Sunday and that lumbar puncture failed on Monday, starting Monday afternoon, I was transported to a normal bedroom, and I was there until Friday. Now, this week is where I experience the most trauma to this day. I am a very motivated, positive, like a go-getter type of personality. So during this week, despite the fact that I was feeling sick and I couldn't eat, like I couldn't swallow anything, walking was hard, breathing was hard, I was trying to stay up and moving. So I had my my Apple Watch with me. And so I was trying to walk at least 5,000, 6,000 steps a day because all I had to do was that throughout the entirety. I had nothing else to do. Nobody was allowed to visit me. Even my doctors would barely come check in on me because I was COVID positive, and there wasn't anything they could do until they could find out what was wrong with me. I couldn't get another lumbar puncture done in the operating room until they had finished everybody else's schedule first because I was COVID positive, and so I would have to be the last schedule on that list. And so for many reasons, I was stuck in a hospital room. Nobody knew what was wrong. My procedure for figuring out what actually is happening to me got pushed back severely. And I was starting to get paralyzed. So I found this out starting maybe on Wednesday, so like halfway into that week. As I said, I was walking around a lot, trying to stay active. There was a mini shower in that room, and at that point I hadn't showered for like a week, and so I felt very nasty. So I really wanted to in the shower. I got in, and all of a sudden I could feel that I couldn't lift my arms higher than this, and I physically could not. It wasn't like it was a pain, I could not do it. And so anyways, I got out of the shower, and I was laying in bed trying to figure out what's wrong with me. I started to feel my face tingle, and I could feel that my mouth wasn't working as it usually had. It was kind of like I had a lisp or something was freezing up. And I noticed it because I was calling my family and friends, and I was scared, obviously, so I was trying to get some kind of comfort. But then when I realized that I couldn't really talk anymore, that started scaring me. So I wanted to see what was going on, and I remember this clearly. I started walking into the bathroom to see myself in the mirror. And at this point, I had a walker with me, just in case. I had told them that I can't walk around that well anymore. So I was holding this walker, and I pushed myself into the bathroom, and I was looking at myself in the mirror, and all of a sudden, I collapsed. I just fell onto the ground. And no, I did not lose consciousness. It was just like my legs gave up under me. So after that, the nurses and doctors were a lot more worried, of course, but hospitals take a long time, and they couldn't get me immediately into the operating room. So after a couple more falls, around Wednesday or Thursday, they were able to get the lumbar puncture done, and they actually succeeded. The whole process was smooth, but as smooth as I can get, of course, because at this point I had lost all mobility from neck down. So I could still talk a little bit, I could still see a little bit and hear a little bit, I can move my, neck around like this, but anything neck down, I couldn't move. And so they had to position me, and people think that if you're paralyzed or starting to get paralyzed, you don't feel any kind of pain, but that's not true. You see, when they diagnosed me with Guillain-Barré syndrome, they told me that essentially what happens is when I got a viral infection, instead of my immune system, my body fighting against that virus and my body joined forces to kind of attack my body. And so what they did was that virus triggered a response where all of my nerves were being attacked. And so one by one, all of my nerves were getting damaged, which led to the paralysis. And so after the lumbar puncture succeeded and they had told me what was going on, they started a treatment. So Guillain-Barré syndrome, what's interesting is that there is no cure. So once you get it, like medication can't kick in like that and just make it go away. But there is a treatment to kind of help slow it and potentially stop it from spreading to your lungs or your heart or your brain, because once it does that, it becomes fatal. But when they started the treatment, it was already kind of too late. At that point now, it was my mouth and everything below I couldn't move. My face was swollen and kind of like, like those phone filters where your whole face feels shifted and like twirled and curled up. That's what it looked like. Also, I couldn't see because my eyelids have been damaged. My nerves and my eyelids have been damaged. So I was literally just closing my eyes. I was conscious the entire time. So I could hear everybody. I just couldn't communicate myself clearly. So then Friday night comes. My parents are a little bit more relieved after the doctors tell them that Guillain-Barré syndrome is usually fine. It's very uncommon in people my age, and it's more common in people like in their 50s and 60s, and it's usually caused by like a flu vaccine or something. They are not sure historically what causes it, but for me, they suspected it might be the COVID virus. And so my parents were a little bit relieved to hear that I make a full recovery. But that night, after a couple hours of that conversation with the doctor, I was sleeping for the first time in like 2 weeks because I have been crying my eyes out every single night because I had a pounding migraine and I did not know what was going on. So that was when my doctors, a bunch of them suddenly rushed into my room. And this is very uncommon because like I said, my doctors and nurses were kind of isolating me because I had COVID, obviously. And so when they rushed in, I knew something was wrong and they wanted to call my parents. And so they called my parents on my phone, which I had to tell them how to get into using my head signals because I could barely move or talk. And from what I heard from that conversation is that my lungs had collapsed. At that point, I think I was so medicated and so paralyzed that I didn't really know what was going on with my body. I tried to convince my doctors and nurses that, no, my lungs are fine. I can breathe fine. Like, it's just this migraine and my body, everything hurts, but I'm breathing fine. And the doctors finally had to say, no, ma'am, if we don't rush you into surgery right now, you will die in a couple hours. And so that's when it snapped. They're talking to my parents. My parents were hysterical, of course. because obviously they thought it was fine and now everything's turning for the worst. So on Friday night, I was rushed out into surgery. I had a breathing tube inserted through my mouth and neck. Now, what's scary about that part is I'm very thankful they caught that early on, and that we started treatment, because it did not spread to my heart or my brain or anything. But the scariest part of that surgery is that I was under anesthesia, but like I'm not sure exactly how long, because obviously I was under anesthesia, so I was very drowsy. But for the last 5 to 10 minutes, I woke up with that surgery. And obviously they have all the vital signs to show that I am either awake or asleep, but they were almost done. They had already placed it down. They were just trying to like stabilize where it was going to be placed. And I could feel the whole thing happening. I couldn't, express how much in pain I was. I couldn't tell them because I was completely paralyzed at this point. My head to toes, everything was paralyzed. I could not talk, I could not see, I could barely hear, but I was fully conscious. And so I think that's what was the hardest for me, was knowing everything that happened to me. And a lot of people they kind of brush this whole experience to the side, because they think, oh, if you're fully paralyzed, you can't be in pain. You probably don't remember much. It's like a big nap. But for me, at least in my experience, that's not what it was like at all. It was kind of like I was trapped in my own body for 4 months, and I was just in excruciating pain where I wanted to end my own life at times, but I could not, because I could not move. So that was very difficult. And then on Sunday, the day after my lung collapse surgery, so Saturday and Sunday, I was transferred to the ICU, but I was transferred into the neurological intensive care unit, because I wasn't just a regular surgical patient. I was going through a syndrome that affected my nervous system. So I was stuck there for the longest time. To be honest, I'm not going to put every single detail of that experience in this video. If you have any questions, you're welcome to leave them down below, and I will make another whole separate video answering all the specifics. But long story short, I was moved from a breathing tube to a ventilator so that I can be tracked more easily, that I can slowly wean off the ventilator. I also had a couple of feeding tubes stuck into me. The first time was relatively easy, but the second time I had to be rushed into surgery because the first feeding tube, they having complications where it was kind of twisted, and it caused my stomach to inflate into a huge like ball, which is what you see on the front page. That was the day that they finally figured out what was wrong and they rushed me into surgery. But I try to focus on the good parts of those 4 months. And some things that I can say is I want to thank every single one of my doctors and nurses at Johns Hopkins downtown Baltimore. I truly could not have done it without them. I have always admired medical staff, especially as a student who had always wanted to go into the medical field. But this experience was like no other. These nurses work so hard. They're always with me day and night, and they truly were my advocates, because I couldn't express how much in pain I was, what I needed, but these nurses just knew. And oftentimes doctors, they're great, but they're busy and they have a lot of patients to tend to, but these nurses get to know you really well. And when I was in there for those 4 months, these people became my friends and my family. So some of my best memories that I have that I'm going to share with you guys is one of the nurses, she had graduated from high school near my neighborhood. And so we clicked immediately, even though I couldn't talk. She was super sweet. We were close in age. And she had known how difficult this entire process was. And so she listened to music with me. We had like concerts in our room. Obviously I couldn't talk, I couldn't see, but I could feel it, And she would paint my nails and my toes because she knew that was something that I loved. At this point, my mom was with me. I really also could not have done this without my mom. She was literally my body and my voice while I could not be there for myself. And so she had told all these nurses what was going on, like what I needed, what I liked, what I usually kind of like how I usually acted when I was in pain. And so my nurses and my mom really worked hand in hand. They would always talk to me. They would invite my friends in regularly. My friends were great as well. They would come in every week to sit by me and just talk to me, although I couldn't respond. So overall, the experience was great. I had a nurse who had auditioned for The Voice. If you're seeing this, I really want to thank you and all the other nurses that were in that room that day. I had never seen those nurses before. I don't even know if they were part of the department that I was in, the NICU. But they walked in, they watched TikToks with me, they scrolled through Instagram with me. This was at the point when I was starting to open my eyes, and so They sang for me, they danced for me. Each of them had a different hobby, and so they were all showcasing their talents. It was like a mini talent show. And that day was really rough for me, and I was crying that morning, but that really lifted my spirits. So enough about the NICU. After that, about 3.5 months, early July, so immediately before 4th of July, I was getting prepared to be discharged to a rehab center. And this rehab center isn't just like physical therapy and occupational therapy. It was for, first, I was getting discharged into their medical rehab unit, which means I was still on a ventilator, which is what this mark is from. And I still couldn't move at all, except for like my hands and arms at this point, and I could kind of like click my tongue and open my eyes. And so they thought I was ready. They discharged me, and I was still on pretty heavy medication. I was on all the heavy drugs you can think of. So when I moved to the rehab center, it was Johns Hopkins Bayview Medical Center. And again, huge love for these nurses and therapists. You guys truly are amazing. They made my experience what it is today. And they are literally the ones who have taught me how to become human again. Because, of course, I can't really explain my whole experience into words, and I'm still processing the whole event. But when I was in that hospital and first transferred to the medical rehab center, I had not set up yet. I was practicing how to, use a suction with my own hand to suction out all the disgusting things in my mouth. I was not eating yet. I was working with a speech therapist to make sure that I was swallowing properly and that I'd be, starting on soft foods first. And so it was a very long process. But my speech therapist, my physical therapist, my occupational therapist, I truly learned a lot from all of them, and they have inspired me so much throughout this entire process because I would not be here without them. And aside from all the actual things they do for their job, which is, teaching me how to walk again, teaching me how to do my laundry, do the dishes, fold laundry, write, type, which they all teach you, by the way, from start point A to point B, because I'm technically an adult, like growing back up from being a baby all the way back to my 20-year-old self. So aside from all of that, my therapists were my best friends. I still visit them to this day, and hopefully one day I can introduce you guys to them. But I could share everything with them. I did have my friends there, but I just felt socially anxious with anybody who didn't really fully understand my situation. And I know that most of my therapists, if not all, and my psychologist, who I am really appreciative for, and I still see him to this day with our sessions, but they knew everything I had gone through. They had seen me grow from the point where I was fully paralyzed to the point now, or a little bit before now, where I was learning how to walk on a little, what is it called? Where it was like I was hanging from the wall and the ceiling, and I was just learning how to walk, and I just had to trust that my legs were there, because at this point I still couldn't feel my legs at all. So at that point, in about early August, I could feel most of my upper body come back, but it was my lower half that was an issue. I told my therapist, I want to start walking. I want to run out of here at the end of August. And my discharge date was set for August 24th. So at this point, I was sick and tired of being in bed. I was sick and tired of being sad. I wanted to get out there and do stuff again. So I told them, put me in the harness. That's what it's called, the harness. And it's a whole track system where the tracks are on the ceiling, and basically you can't fall. They lift your body weight up, so even if you kind of collapse on your legs and your knees give out, it catches you. And so after I learned how to stand with support with people and everything, I started to walk on the harness, and I just went for it. I just trusted my legs would, remember it, muscle memory, and I ran. Well, I am pleased to say that I did walk out of the hospital on August 24th. I did not quite run, even though I thought I was running, and I have a video clip of that I can show you guys. I thought I was running, but it was very much of a slow walk. But either way, I was very proud of myself for being able to walk out of that hospital alive, functioning, and mostly recovered. And now that I'm back home, the transition was obviously rough and difficult. And sometimes I do miss being at the hospital more because it was just so much easier with all my therapists and doctors and nurses there all the time. But some recent good updates are that I have started working again at a veterinary office, and I love my job. I can feel myself getting stronger day by day. I have officially passed my safety driving program, in which that means although my license was valid, I still had to go through a safety program just in case my symptoms or my weakness act up all of a sudden. So I passed that and now have a full driver's license back, so I can drive everywhere I want. And now I have graduated from occupational and speech therapy, and I'm just finishing my physical therapy, which I should be done with by the end of this year. I have started running. I have started walking up steps, and I've started just doing a lot more of these normal things that I've been looking forward to. To this day, I try to remember to be thankful for the small things, like being able to take a sip of water, which was my dream from like May to July, because I could not put anything in my mouth, and these medications dried my mouth out completely. Being able to use the bathroom regularly, because there are horrible things that you have to go through if you cannot do that regularly. And I don't tell this story to earn pity or attention from people. If anything, it's not something that I really feel like I was proud of in the beginning. Of course, now I'm very proud of it, knowing that it's made me who I am now. It's almost like my defining story of my life, and it's helped me reflect a lot on my past and what I've gone through. But in the beginning, I was very ashamed. I felt like I had deserved it. Maybe I did something wrong. I didn't understand why I was 20 years old and I had to go through all of this. And I still have a lot to unpack, and I'm still kind of going through it emotionally. So please forgive me if I'm a little bit like confusing or I'm babbling a little bit, but hopefully I'll be able to explain more in other videos and more clarity. But like I said, I tell this video because I do want to let you guys know that I have been through some of the darkest moments of my life, and not to say or not to compare my difficulties with others, but I want to be there as a support, as a resource, maybe for people who are going through similar things, who are experiencing these symptoms maybe, because I know that recently there have been more cases of Guillain-Barré syndrome for our age range. So I would like to spread the word about this if possible. And yeah, now I make this video because I feel like I'm finally at the point where I'm proud enough to share it with all of you publicly. I don't know how long it'll take for me to get through this. I am currently diagnosed with PTSD and PICS, which are post-traumatic stress disorder and post-intensive care syndrome. So post-intensive care syndrome is a part of PTSD. And I'm still working through it with my psychologist. Of course, I have nerve pain everywhere because of the cold weather, rain, and just weakness in my muscles. I'm still learning how to do the small, normal things again. But I thought this was a good milestone video for both myself, my family, and others. And so I'm so incredibly grateful that I'm here this day and I get to share this with you all. So thank you so much for sitting through this long video, and I hope I made sense for most part. Just drop any comments if you have any questions, but otherwise I hope you liked this video. So if you did, please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye.